Everyone, I'm Anita Huberman. I'm President and CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade. And are you excited about doing business in Surrey? You have to sound way more excited than that. Are you excited about Surrey? And we're so pleased to really focus on Surrey as a destination this afternoon with the State of Canada's tourism industry address by our Federal Minister of Tourism, Minister Ferrada. Let's give her a great Surrey welcome. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of our Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, Tawasin First Nations, our Kaikut, our Coquitlam, our Inuit, and our Métis peoples. They have a profound connection to the land and water that surrounds our great city of Surrey. They are our economic partners. And I also sit on Destination BC's Tourism Advisory Committee to really ensure that we are focused on indigenous tourism assets, to really reflect the history of our indigenous communities and to ensure that they are true economic partners today and tomorrow. Today's event would not be possible without sponsorship support. And I have to say that we are so looking forward to welcoming FIFA in 2026. Mayor Locke, we need that stadium built before that. And it can be done. So our supporting sponsor, a great round of applause to the Vancouver Football Club. Our community sponsor, Discover Surrey. They are our tourism agency for Surrey. Our ongoing progress partners are the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan, represented by SNF Benefits, the law firm of Fasken, as well as Western Community College. A round of applause, please. Now, I would like to welcome some government representatives, in addition to the minister, that are in the room. Our City of Surrey Mayor, Brenda Locke. City of Surrey Councillor Linda Ennis. Everyone, the Surrey Board of Trade, we're one of the top 5 largest chambers of commerce boards of trades in the country. There are 430 of us, and we support business and bring business into our respective cities. We're a not-for-profit entity, an independent business organization, though we do fall under the Federal Ministry of Economic Development in a variety of ways, more specifically the Board of Trade Act. And we have a very intrinsic service portfolio, which includes workforce development, international trade, business development from startup to scale up, government advocacy, advocating at the different levels of government and being your concierge of connections. I encourage you to check out our website at businessinsurrey.com for the many exciting initiatives that the Surrey Board of Trade is engaging in to really enhance the economy for Surrey, the region, the province, and our nation. Surrey in itself is going to be the largest city in British Columbia, they are now saying, by 2029. By 2042, we will have more than 1 million people, comparable to the cities of Toronto and Montreal. We are a city not to be ignored. We're a border city. We're part of the Cascadia Economic Corridor. We're advocating for high-speed rail from California all the way to Vancouver with a stop in Surrey. We have a health and technology district, making Surrey a technology destination. and really an ecosystem of both private educational institutions and public educational institutions that are driving our ability to tie industry needs to curriculum development. And we see many of the students from Western Community College through their hospitality program today, and they work with our BC government as well to really ensure that the hospitality sector, the hardest hit sector during the pandemic, is meeting the workforce challenges of today and tomorrow. Everyone, it's my honor to introduce your keynote speaker for this afternoon. She was appointed in July 2023 as Canada's Minister of Tourism and Minister responsible for the Economic Development Agency of Canada for the regions of Quebec. She was born in Chile. She arrived in Canada as a refugee during her childhood. She was raised in Montreal's East End, transitioned from a career in the cultural sector to politics, becoming a Montreal City Councillor in 2005. She was elected as a Member of Parliament in 2019 and re-elected in 2021. Everyone, she has a long history within our federal government. She previously served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Ministers of Housing, Transport, and Immigration. Please help me welcome, a great Surrey welcome, everyone, to Canada's Minister of Tourism, the Honourable Soraya Ferrada.
Wow, that was a really welcome, Surrey welcome. Bonjour tout le monde, merci d'être ici avec moi aujourd'hui. I want to thank you for acknowledging the indigenous people and nations of the unceded territories, and we're doing this event today. I think it's so important that we do that every time that we acknowledge the history and diverse culture that was here before us, and it is our responsibility and our path of reconciliation that we, all of us, do together. I don't know if my colleagues are here. They were supposed to be here. Maybe they're not, but I'm very close with your MPs of the region, John, Sue, and Ken, and of course, Randeep, and for sure, I mean, I think they wanted to be here today, but hopefully you see them more than I do, or sometimes I do them in Vancouver, because we sit, as you know, many weeks in a row. And I would start by saying that I'm super happy to be here because this is the second trip as a minister to BC. And I've come to Surrey. I've actually lived here when I was young because my mother decided that she wanted to move west. And I lived in White Rock, moved a couple of months in Surrey and in Langley. So it's a region that I've known in my life. Don't ask me any names of street because I don't remember. It's been a very long time. I was 15 years old, so you have to bear with me. But I'm very super happy to be here because, to your point, Anita, I think Surrey is a destination that people want to see, and you have this jewel of a region that you can now push to the world, and I think it's something that I can't wait to see how you're gonna do that in the future. I want to also start by thanking the staff of where we're at, which is the Morgan Creek Gulf, because the staff of the tourism sector is the backbone of the industry. And I want to thank them for your meal that you're having today and by arranging the room and making sure that we feel welcome here at the Morgan Creek Golf Course. So thank you for all the staff. And I'm excited to come here and talk about tourism. Surrey is, as you know, one of the very diverse cities, and people are starting to notice. People are starting to notice that something's happening in Surrey, and I think it's when I look at the magazine, you probably know this better than Food and Wine magazine. I think you've maybe seen this article where Surrey has been one of the top emerging global cities for food lovers. So it shows to see that, people are starting to notice that something's happening in Turkey. And to the mayor's conversation we had earlier, it's one of the fastest growing cities. And, by year did you say? 2030? You would surpass Vancouver?
We already are there.
Okay.
Yeah, we're there.
You're there.
2029.
Well, when you look at, cities like that growing, you have nothing to envy to anybody. You have so many things to offer that I think, will be really inspiring to see. When you think about tourism, what do you think about? People think about what? Going on vacation, going south, going other places. And people, when I was named minister, people were saying to me, "Oh, you have the fun minister." I'm like, well, maybe for you it's fun, and it is fun. We had to say that it could be fun, but it's business fun. This is an industry. This is a huge industry, and this is one of the biggest industry of the country, and it's big numbers, and it's big numbers here in Surrey. 80,000 jobs. We're talking about what, 5 billion to the GDP of BC. It's huge. And so not only we say it's fun, and I always say that we maybe, when you have the sherry on the Sunday, well, I say that tourism is the ice cream. That's what I always say. Not only are we the sherry, but we're the ice cream. And just for Canada, it's big numbers. And maybe some of you know, but it's almost 2 million jobs. It's 2.3% of our GDP. It's more than agriculture, fishery, automotive. And it's every community of this country has tourism. And in some small communities, tourism accounts for the whole economy of that community. So it is big numbers, but also small businesses. 99% of our economy is based on these small businesses that makes this country work in every community. For us, as a government, what are our priorities? And you've talked about Indigenous communities. I think it's a huge opportunity for Indigenous communities, not only to grow the industry sector for them, but it is for them also an economic reconciliation, for them to be part of the tourism. But they have to do it in their own terms, and they have to do it at their own pace, and they have to decide what is it that they want to share with the world and how they want to do that. And we have to respect that rhythm and that and the pace they want to do it, and we have to support it for sure. After the pandemic, the tourism sector closed down completely, totally. But in 2019, we had the best year of tourism for Canada. So not only did we, are recovering the numbers in terms of after the pandemic, but we need to recover the momentum we had before the pandemic. And that momentum, I think the tourism industry for Indigenous will be one of the levers to do that, because we have what people are looking for. Not only we have great landscape, great cities, like here in Surrey, but we have authenticity. We're welcoming people. And when people want to go somewhere, they don't just want to see something. They want to feel something. They want to go back home and say, I made this great small business. And they want to tell stories, because we can share those stories with the world. We have a capacity of not only recovering the momentum we had before the pandemic, but to grow more the sector. Right now, when you think about it, the rate of growth of the economy in Canada, it's about 4.3%. The tourism sector is about 5.3%. So the tourism sector is actually growing faster than the average economy of our country. And when you look at that number on the international side, it's 7.1%. So we have a capacity of growth bigger than we're doing right now. So if we stay on the same path, by 2030, we'll probably be growing our sector to around 140 billion in our GDP. But we can actually go and be 160 So there's a $20 billion more capacity of growth if we work together to do that. And what does that mean? That's 84,000 more jobs. That's $5 billion more in tax revenues, and it's a 14% increase of our GDP. So it shows that Canada can actually be a superpower of tourism. And for that, we'll need places like Surrey to contribute to that, to contribute to that 20% to $20 billion capacity. So what we are doing to help on that front, we adopted last year, and it was my predecessor that adopted in July in 2023, the National Tourism Growth Strategy. There's a few pillars on that strategy. One of those pillars, like I said, it was indigenous tourism. We put down $20 million on tourism for indigenous on two streams. First stream, ITAC, which is Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, is delivering about $25,000 grants for small businesses to help grow capacity. Because one of the things that we have to do is that we have to make sure that you can market a tourism sector like the indigenous one, but the sector has to be ready to receive the tourism that will come. So we have to make sure that the small businesses have the capacity to welcome these people and welcome the tourism sector that will actually grow. So they're already giving out a few investments, and here in Surrey, we have supported a couple of businesses and making sure that their indigenous communities are supported to grow their own sector. We also announced in that front $10 million for signature projects. What does that mean? And signature projects is not only are they market ready, but they're there to be force center in the world stage, be the faces of what it is indigenous tourism in this country. And I think here in BC, I'm sure there's signature projects that we can think about, and their communities, are looking into those and how do we can market those to make clusters of indigenous tourism and help others grow with them afterwards. And that $10 million fund will be announced shortly. You can follow that. We want to make sure that we're leveraging that money, making sure that we're not the only partner at the table, because tourism sector will only grow if other people are at the table, not only the Minister of Tourism and the government. We also announced $108 million that was distributed to the regional agencies like Mine in Quebec, Pacific Can here, and the Prairies, and FEDAV in Ontario. And they have to send money to small businesses, again, to grow the sector. And within that $108 million, it's over 3 years. That also has to include 15% of that for indigenous tourism and small businesses. So, of course, you will see, and all of these agencies have, started already to support and flow that money out. The other thing that I would say, as a Minister of Tourism, I don't have any money, as you can imagine. All the money goes to agencies, goes through indigenous communities. But what I do have is I'm your champion in terms of the tourism sector. And everywhere I go, I say that the only way for tourism to work is that all ministers understand that the tourism sector and economy is one very important for their own ministers. We can think about transportation. We can think about infrastructure. We can think about housing. We can think about immigration. So all of these ministers will be convened around a table that we call the Council of Ministers for the Tourism Growth. So we're working on the launch of that council. Probably will be due in April. And I think it's very important that we use all our influence to make sure that tourism, at the end of the day, is top priority in terms of the economic growth of the country, and that it's in everybody's radar when you think about tourism sector. So if you take the transportation, for instance, as you well know, because you're in Surrey, and I don't know if you guys watched Amazing Race, was it last year or 2 years ago? And they had to travel in BC without taking a plane. Do you remember that? I don't know if you've seen that. So just to show that transportation in this country is so important to the industry, If we cannot develop our tourism sector on the transportation, then people won't be able to get to Surrey, to other places. So we have to make sure that we're doing that. The other challenges that we have, and I'm so glad that we have students from the hospitality, because it's our labor shortage. And we have to make sure that people see this as a career path. These are not summer jobs. Workers in the industry are the backbone of the industry, and they can make a career of the industry because it is one of the fastest growing industry in the country. So I salute you to have chosen the hospitality careers, and we have to make sure that we are attracting more people to the industry, making sure that we have the people that we need in order to grow the industry. The last challenge, and I think it's an important one, and you've seen it most here in BC than other places, is climate change. Climate change has affected this industry more than ever. I've been, not to say in my own province, when you have a ice hotel that is actually hotter inside than outside than inside, and the ice hotel is actually melting because of climate change. When you have fires in BC, that the hotels are closing down because people think that the whole province is on fire. So we have an issue in terms of climate change, and we have to make sure that we are addressing these issues to make sure that we are supporting the industry in a way that it will better be prepared for what's to come. I will conclude by saying this. Borders and the geopolitics in the world, we have a country that is been said to be the safest one to travel. And in a world where geopolitics are what it is today, people are looking for countries where they can travel, they can be safe, they can have connections, they can have human connections, because above and beyond the economy of this, tourism is pride. Tourism is the share of storytelling of who we are as human. And when they come to see us, they leave and they have this sense of belonging, of sharing stories that they can then take away and say people, well, you need to go to Surrey because there's, stories to discover and share. So I'm so, proud to be a Minister of Tourism. I'm proud to be in this country and making sure that we are selling this country to the world, because it's not only the best country in the world, but you have the best city, which is Surrey. So thank you for all the work that you're doing.
So everyone, we're going to engage in a bit of a question period, so to speak, but a dialogue with the minister. So if you do have a question, we have a microphone in the middle of the room. If you can state your name, your company name, and your question or comment very succinctly, and the minister will respond accordingly. And so feel free to go up to that microphone. And but I'm going to just start with the first question, Minister. And I just wanted to know, what is the federal government's plan, or is there a plan in place right now to promote the nation to the world, and really include cities like ours within that promotional strategy?
It's a great question. We gave about $48 million to Destination Canada, which already has an ongoing budget annually to do its work. But one of the money that we gave to them, incremental to what they're already getting, is to make sure that we are getting back the business tourism sector. Because as you know, that's one of the pieces that we haven't recovered fully yet, is the tourism, business tourism. And I think cities like Surrey eventually, of course, should be part of that. We have some countries and cities that are our market. And I had a question this morning on the radio station where they said, well, the geopolitics is not really good with China and India. So then, how are you going to, recover that? And I'm like, well, first of all, the first market for Canada, it's the United States. 2/3 of the market of the tourism sector, it's the United States. And we have to make sure that we're getting back that tourism, especially on the business side. And during the pandemic, a lot of cities, even in the States, are the best competitors for our own cities. Now we're in the States because they did convention centers, they did all these things to make sure that they were keeping their conventions and businesses in the States. So now we have to redouble our efforts to make sure that we're getting those investments back here. And I think Surrey should be part of that, and being this really big city like yours should be part of that plan. And I think Tourism Destination Canada, with all the destinations in Ontario, Destination BC, are also part of that conversation. And we just have to make sure that we're coordinating them right. The other thing that I would say is that as a Board of Trade and as businesses yourself, you know the sectors that if you know, for instance, that in some science or pharma, for instance, and you know there's a convention that you want to get here because you have businesses here that could be part of that conversation, well, let us know, because we have to work together making sure that we're attracting businesses here that we're going to help your own business here, because that's why we want conventions here. We want conventions that are going to grow the economy locally, making sure that the networks of these conventions are, driving people to your city and driving people to know your own businesses so you can then do business with these cities. That's why we're getting conventions. It's growing your own economy.
One of the key challenges that our city is facing is lack of infrastructure. And so we're playing catch up in a city where no one thought we would be the largest city in British Columbia. So on a variety of fronts, we're all fighting that battle. But when it comes to destination infrastructure like a convention center or a stadium or other pieces, to really ensure we're ready to be that large city, what kind of support can the federal government provide to our city or in concert with private sector partners to ensure we build the destination assets that Surrey so desperately needs?
I think we're going to the government Canada has put, since our government's been there in 2015, we have put a lot of money in infrastructure, not only in infrastructure in terms of building, infrastructure, but also infrastructure in terms of transportation, in terms of roads, in terms of bridges, and in terms of making sure that we're supporting the growth by what people need to get to the city or out of the city. I think after the pandemic, in the context of inflation, one of the challenges that we will have is that before going back to big investments in infrastructure, because infrastructure money could also increase inflation. So we have to make sure that we're supporting cities and provinces in making the most priority choices to make sure that we're putting the money that it's not influence the inflation, because if that one of the risks. So I think in the year to come, we have still a year to come before interest rates start coming down and we are getting in a better economy where infrastructure money will start flowing again more quickly than right now. But I do think the cities that are well prepared in terms of how they see this, their own development in 5-10 years, I think will be most prepared to go and get the money to support their growing of the infrastructure they'll need. I've seen cities that have no plan, and provinces that have, in some regions have no plan in terms of where they're going in the next 10 years. And I think Surrey, you know where you're going. I've talked to the mayor, and I think you have a plan. And I think, investing in those plans and studies and making sure that you're ready, we'll be able to be there when we are in a better position of investing more money in infrastructure.
I just broke the mic thing. We'll fix it. Thank you, Anita. I want to just jump off of one of the things you talked about, which is public transportation, because that is also a part of what we need to be looking at our different opportunities for tourism and building community. And I just wanted to say that a lot of what we do with tourism actually is community building too. So when we talk about our arenas and our stadiums and all those great things that we want to build in our city, it's also about building who we are as a city. And so it's critically important to the essence of our city and who we are. I do want to say also that I really want you to come back in 6 weeks from now when we have Vaisakhi. Vaisakhi is the largest event outside of India, and Surrey just puts on a heck of a show for everybody. People come from all over the world, and I think we all often don't even realize the size of our Vaisakhi parade right here in Surrey. So we're doing lots of different things like that, but I do want to say when we get to that point where we're building that kind of infrastructure we need, I thank the federal government very much because you have recognized the relationship directly with cities, and we have seen money directly given from the federal government to cities, and that's important. And case in point is our museum, where the federal government gave directly to cities. And I think continuing that relationship between the federal government and the infrastructure of our unique needs in Surrey is critically important. So I encourage you on that front. And I would also recognize the federal MPs that we've had in our city have done a lot of work in that front. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I did break the mic. Just Roop.
To your point, it goes to say that cities are in the best position to know what their community needs. They know their businesses, they know their needs, they know their community organizations, and they can have their planning. It is your responsibility as a city to have that planning and to have that long-term vision of where you want to bring the city and what are the needs on transportation, on housing, and I think it starts there. And after that, you have to come and support it. So that's why I'm saying that right now, I think we're in a process of, we still have maybe a year before the economy takes, we're in a better position to grow more the investments in the government just around transportation. In the budget of 2022, if you remember, the government of Canada, we put in money for transportation. It's a $3 billion program that's coming down the line yearly for at least 15 years to support communities to build a transportation. But if cities are not ready to and don't have that planning, it's going to be hard to be partnered with the city if you're in the province and the government if you're not. So I think we have a responsibility to make sure that cities are well prepared. The housing accelerator fund that we put in place, that we just announced here in Surrey, that's also infrastructure money for housing. If you don't have housing, you don't have works that can come. If you're growing your population, you need housing to put a roof over their heads. And that's it. That's economy. That's, if you don't have housing, transportation, the growth of your economy, it's not going to happen. So we have to make sure that we're supporting cities to do that.
Let's talk about the aviation sector. Last fall, the Surrey Board of Trade, we hosted an aviation dialogue. And yes, we don't have an airport in Surrey, but we're in between two major international airports, Vancouver and Abbotsford. We sit on the board of the Abbotsford Airport Authority as well. And of course, there's some that want to build a smaller airport here in Surrey. Tell us about the federal government's goals and priorities for the aviation sector to really support them, another really hard-hit industry during the pandemic.
So the transportation, to what I just said, is they're part of my Council for Tourism Growth. One of the first ministers that I talked to when I was appointed minister was transportation, was my colleague Pablo Rodriguez. And I said to him, Pablo, tourism, transportation, they go together. And honestly, if I can get the Minister of Transport to understand that, that transportation and the Minister of Transport is not only on the regulation side, but it is also so important for the economy in terms of I think will be a big win for us. Now to the aviation sector. Canada is the second biggest country in the world, right, in terms of space. So everywhere you want to get, when tourists come to Canada, they say, I'm going to go to Niagara Falls, and then I'll go to Montreal, and then I go to Quebec, and I only have 5 days. I'm like, sure, really? That's not going to work. Oh, and I want to go to Vancouver, by the way. I said, no, forget it. There's no way. People don't understand Canada is so big, right? So aviation is so important for us. To your point, what do we do? I think there's many things we can do with the aviation. I've been talking to many stakeholders on the aviation, WestJet, Porter, Air Canada, many of them. I know there's some issues on the cost side for the aviation in Canada. But one of the things that a lot of them have been talking to me about is pilots. One of the things that we have right now is pilot shortage. And there's no way you're gonna fly a plane without a pilot. So if you don't have a pilot, you don't have a plane. And a lot of them are saying, we're gonna have a problem. Within 5-10 years, the shortage of pilots will be so huge that we're gonna be looking into how do we make sure that we are having enough pilots to have routes in the country, especially regional routes. And it is something that I've been talking to Pablo about, and we have, lots to discuss, but it is, for me, one of the biggest issues is airlines in this country.
In Surrey, we have 111 different languages that are spoken, very diverse. How is the tourism strategy for Canada really ensuring that it enables all of us to understand each other as a country, as citizens? Our differences are also our strength.
Well, my first language is Spanish. My second one is French. My third is English. So by the time I get to English, sometimes you look at me, you know what I'm thinking, because I'm trying to translate it in my head. I'm serious. I'm really serious about that. But I think tourism, you know what? I think it's to the point that I was saying earlier, it's a question of pride. It's a question of sharing experiences, and sometimes that doesn't mean that you need to understand each other. Sharing a meal, looking at beautiful scenery, sharing the fact that, when you go to White Rock, you go see the White Rock, which is literally a white rock. And people actually know what you're talking about. And sharing a picture doesn't mean that you're speaking the language. Images sometimes. So I think Canada has that power. It's that power of connection. And I think that's what we're selling. We're selling as a country the experiences that you can actually live here in a safe space. And honestly, that's huge in their stage of the world right now. Coming to a country where you're going to be safe, you can experience the world, and sharing those connections, and go back home and have lived and come back to a place where you're going to feel that you made friends. I really do think Canada has that power that you don't see in a lot of countries right now.
Any other questions from the audience? Please go to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Harpo. I'm the executive director of 5X, which is a large South Asian youth organization. We're actually the largest organization in Canada for South Asian youth. And I'm one of the youngest artistic directors of an arts and cultural organization in Canada. And I say that because it's actually not a responsibility I take lightly. I'm from Surrey, and I'm happy to represent that across the country. So our festival happens every June. It's a multi-event, multi-day festival. And our organization is beyond the festival. We're really cultural producers. We're on a world stage telling people around the world what Surrey actually is, what it looks like, the music and the art and the artists and the performers that are making global impact are from Surrey. And so storytelling is really important as an organization. And I think that's often an overlooked component to tourism, as well as how do we tell the story of the places that we want people to come and visit. And so I know that our organization and then some other festivals in the province sometimes have a hard time fitting into a lot of the tourism grants at the federal level or at the provincial level. And so I guess I'm just wondering what the federal government is doing to perhaps expand some of those parameters and the priorities. I know we had a hard time fitting into specifically the Pacifican guidelines, and so these are grants that we're not even submitting for. So I just wanted to ask where that sort of cultural production piece fits into for the tourism strategy.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, I come from the cultural sector, so I totally understand your question. I've worked with many cultural organizations in Montreal, which is, Montreal as a comparison, many years ago, about 15 years ago, decided that the culture was going to be the leverage for the economic development of the city. So I think I totally understand. I was going to talk to you about Pacific Can. I would happily talk to Arch about it. I really do think that in terms of economic development agencies, we have to see culture as an economic driver and not only as arts and culture, which, yes, again, it's fun, but no, it's an economic driver, and we can actually support organizations within the lens of the economic development. So I really do believe that agencies, like the ones of the regional agencies, are one of the levers that we should be using more to support economic development in communities through arts and events, because they are an attraction, and you can actually measure the impact of an event. To the mayor's comments on Visaki, it is huge. The impact of the culture when you have an event like that is huge. And I've been joking around about Taylor Swift in all my speeches. I didn't bring it up, but I think we should, because people joke around about Taylor Swift, but Taylor Swift in Toronto, the huge on their GDP will be huge. She's there for 6 days. It's going to be huge. So events that attract people outside your city are export revenue for your city. And that's so important. And so I do think that with other places in the government's agency, we should be pushing more in terms of supporting arts and culture as economic drivers. So I'm gladly talk to you about this, but I think regional agencies are one of the levers that we should be using more.
Other questions from the audience, please.
Hi, I'm Angie, and I'm the Executive Director for Discover Surrey. I'm just wondering, transportation is part of the landscape that we have challenges in Surrey, not only on a municipal level, but for tourism, without a national bus transportation system to get our visitors across the country, or a train system that is affordable. How is the federal government looking at these national transportation channels, and what can we do to advocate for it? And my second question is, at a federal level, how can we guarantee that we have sustainable funding for tourism to promote Canada on a global basis against the United States, and to attract international visitors to come to Canada? If you have a few moments, that would be great.
Okay, so I don't want to give you the very political answer, which is federal does not plan transportation. We regulate transportation, which is very different. So we can actually make sure that transportation is safe, right? That's the main focus of the Minister of Transport. But as cities and provinces, they have to plan their transportation on the ground to make sure that we have the network of mobility in all cities and regions, and the federal government should be there to support that in order to make it happen, of course. But we are not the sole responsible. It's not the federal government responsibility to have a vision of what I'm sorry, I have the French word. Serge, peut-être tu vas m'aider. L'aménagement du territoire. How do you would say that in English? the zoning, the planning of a city, it's the city's responsibility. I don't think the mayor would want me as a federal government to come and tell her what to do in her city. But we are there to support. We're there to make sure that we're supporting that and that we are putting money on a yearly basis to make sure that we have a long-term planning. Because we know that transportation, you're not going to do it in a year.
No.
You're going to do it in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? So we have to make sure that we're there if the province and the city demands it and asks for that. Well, we're supposed to be there to support.
I think what I was looking more for is, I know the federal ministry doesn't look after transportation, but has it advocated that our provinces work together so we can have a national?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And one of the things that I'm trying to do is getting on the agenda of the federal ministers meeting, which is all ministers for transportation, with the federal minister, which we call the FTP meetings on transportation. I want tourism to be one of the subject of the ad agenda. Because one of the things that we have to make sure is that transportation sees us as a tourism sector, again, as an industry, that whatever decision they make has an impact of that industry. And that goes to every minister of our government. I identified 22 ministers that should know about tourism. If they don't, we have a problem.
That's what I was more looking for, is the advocacy within
Exactly.
the
So
provinces.
my role is to advocate for our sector with all these ministers and in cabinet, but making sure that we have a roundtable kind of discussion around this is a plan for tourism growth, and this is everybody's responsibility to make sure that we are advancing on that agenda.
Thank you.
So a very warm good morning in the galaxies of intellectuals here, and my respect and regards to the minister. I am a Bachelor of Hospitality Management student, and my question to you is, as the situations like pandemic or recession, or even the unforeseen situations that are bound to happen, how do you think, because the tourism is the hardest and fastest hit industries, and how do you think that people or the workers of this industry can see a secure future in this place? Or how does the ministry look into that?
Well, it goes to say that when the pandemic hit, the government put a lot of money into supporting businesses to make sure that we were getting through the pandemic and that we could help as much people go through with it and survive. And the resiliences of the sector proved that we helped. Of course, for instance, the emergency loan that we had, a lot of businesses, maybe couldn't reimburse loans, so we know that there is still a lot of businesses that find it difficult. But honestly, for sure, I can tell you, when the borders open, what people want to do? We were isolated for 2 years. People started traveling. Travel right now is like we're back on the numbers we had before the pandemic. So when people travel, what do people want to do? Stay in hotels, eat in restaurants, have activities. So for sure, I'm convinced that, again, it is the fastest growing economy in this country. And I see a really bright future for us as an industry. So what I'm worried about is more not having enough people to support that growing industry. I don't think we're going to be missing work. I think we have to make sure that people like you guys and your friends and other friends want to choose this sector to work. Because the only way we're going to grow the sector is having people in that sector. That's what my worry is, more than not having a job for you.
You don't have to worry about that. We're enthusiastic. We're ever ready to serve you and this industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Deb, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Punkrit from Western Community College. And my question to you is, what inspired or motivated you to be a part of tourism industry?
Well, the Prime Minister asked me. No, it's a joke. I'm sorry, it's a joke. No, I mean, actually, it's really funny because before being an MP, I was a city councillor in Montreal in 2005, but I worked in the culture sector for many years, and I've seen what events and culture sector can do to an economy and to a city. I was raised in a very poor neighborhood of my city, where the Cirque du Soleil installed themselves. They had a venue, and what that did for us as a neighbor, I see what tourism sector and events and culture can do for a city. And when I was an MP and I got to be permanent secretary to immigration, to transportation, and to housing, I feel that today kind of prepared me to be Minister of Tourism, because honestly, all of those challenges are the challenges of our industry. So I'm really glad to be a minister now. I've learned that much in the past 4 years that I can now use that knowledge and say, well, this is our challenge, but this is our opportunity. So that's why I'm so, blessed and privileged to be in this position now.
Perfect. Thank you, ma'am.
Next, please. Go ahead.
Minister, earlier there was a reference made with regards to trains. Canadian Geographic magazine had an excellent essay on the whole issue of trains in Canada. And unlike areas of the world, such as Europe, we are closing down tracks. We are severing the connections that ought to have been connecting the whole of the country together. The only way that you can get between here and Montreal, for example, are either by vehicles or plane.
Yep.
Both of them are pretty difficult if you're a family. Both are very, very difficult if you're wanting to explore the country, if you don't have facilities such as that. I think that if we're going to talk about tourism, even intra-country, we have got to be thinking about the train issue.
Yeah.
That's all. I wanted to emphasize that. It's important. It's incredibly important. And I was astonished to read how disastrous the situation had gotten with regards to trains.
Yeah, I do understand that. And one of the things that I would leave you with to think about is what I started when I was saying Canada is a big country. Not only is it a big country, geographically, so that's a challenge in terms of supporting a network of trains and rails, in terms of cost of the managing of sorry, it's my French in my head again. And we're now 40 million people. So when people compare us to Europe, I find it a bit difficult because Europe is pretty small in terms of geographically. Geographically, they're very small. But there are 500 million people. So the population of Europe can support an industry like the rails because there are more people than we are. And we have a bigger country. So we have two challenges that addresses the issue on rails, on airlines, on just roads. People were asking, we should do a road to the north. Can you imagine doing a road to the north? There's no way we can pay for that. Managing the l'entretien, I'm looking at Serge, maintenance, thank you. Because we're so big as a territory and so small in terms of a population to support the infrastructure of that. It doesn't mean that we have to do better. We have to make sure that we're connecting regionals in terms of the needs of the basis needs of health, food, and yes, tourism. So all of that combination, we have to make sure that we're supporting that. As a regional minister for Quebec, I'm supporting an airline. I'm giving money to support the airline, because if I don't give that money, the airline won't be able to go north, bring people, bring food, bring medicine. So I think we have to think about not only our economic development and tourism sector, but also supporting communities. So we are still a big country, and we still have people in the north and regions that people eventually will be able to visit. Because if we close down, because we are not supporting the regional transportation, hopefully we'll be a big country with people in every community of this country. But it is a big challenge.
I would suggest that we ought to be at the very minimum preserving and protecting the existing network that we have, and the fact that we're closing things down in a substantive way is not the way to be going to encourage in the long term tourists coming.
Yeah,
And tourists from back east.
absolutely. I agree with you. And as a country, then we have to make some sometimes difficult decision in terms of maybe some region transportation is not viable, and we have collectively have to decide, or we're paying for that because we have to make sure that we're keeping it. It's like public transportation. Some routes in public transportation are not viable, but we keep them because they're needed for communities. They need it, to transport people from A to B. But sometimes those routes are not viable. But it's the same thing for trains. So I agree with you that we have to have a better sense of what is needed in this country, making sure that we're keeping the roads that are very most important
If
for
we're
us.
going to build for the future.
Hopefully, yes.
Other questions from the audience, please? Please.
Good afternoon, Minister, and all the dignitaries and guests here. Myself, DJ, from the Western Community College. And when I was listening to you, I heard of a lot of projects which are coming up in the pipeline and all those things. So I'm looking for an opportunity. So how our institution or any institution of tourism, hospitality, especially students, they can contribute to such projects, maybe from the research, planning, or maybe at some point execution plan. I know you must be having a lot of expert people on your hand who will be working on this project, but these students are hungry to learn. The students they're having a lot of energy and passion for this industry. So how can we utilize their energy, their hunger to learn into such kind of projects from the scratch, and they'll be the future leaders. They are the future leaders of this industry. So is there any scope, any potential opportunity for students also to be part of such projects, and this will help for them to learn a lot for sure? That's my question.
Well, I would say that I think locally, just getting involved in your own community to see what's happening in your community and how you can support the community to have that vision and developing either projects that actually would contribute to the tourism growth, I think it's a good start. As a Minister of Tourism, again, I'm not the one with the projects. You're the one with the projects. I'm here to advocate for you and making sure that I'm supporting you to people know what's happening here in Surrey, for instance. So I think if you have students here in Surrey, get involved. Board of Trade, get involved with community organizations, get involved with Destination Surrey, get involved. I think supporting those organizations and developing their projects and their vision, I think it's a really good place to start.
Thank you.
Just have two final questions for you, and one of them relates to that a third of Surrey's population is under the age of 19. And one of the key assets, our Surrey Music City Centre in partnership with Fusion Presents and the Surrey Board of Trade, is really cultivating young talent, young musicians. We're bringing BC Ballet to Surrey for a performance in a few weeks. Music is the foundation of communities, of so many different cultural assets. But how is the federal government working with cities, with provinces, on programming, just to ensure that that our talent stays here, that they don't have to go to Los Angeles to make it? Do you have any comments on that?
Well, you bring me back to my years of culture sector and supporting artists, and we have this amazing creative talent in this country. And I think to your point, we have one of the biggest challenges, I think, will be to make sure that we are keeping their intellectual property here in Canada, and we're supporting those artists to thrive here. And if you have artists in Surrey, that they can thrive here. And now with social media, the world is a stage. It's not only Surrey. So having people here branding themselves as Surrey and getting to be part of that industry actually will help you bring people here, because I've been seeing social influencers change how communities sell themselves. And these creators and these artists can actually be a huge driver to market yourselves and keep them here, for instance, in Surrey. Again, how can we support that? We have to make sure that we're giving them the tools to be able to pay the rent, be able to create and be artists full-time, for instance. And we are doing a lot of that through Heritage, through also Randy Boissonneau, that now was my predecessor, now is at Labor, supporting, making sure that we have programs to support new talent and new workplaces that are not traditionally like the ones that you're talking about. I think there's also a huge opportunity for us in terms of you know, the country and people being so creative in this country.
My final question, of course, has to do with FIFA. And, you know, how is, so we don't, in our city, we won't have any tournaments, but we're part of the regional activation of assets surrounding the FIFA tournament in Vancouver. And of course, there's some in the States, in Toronto. What is the strategy that the federal government is engaging in to ensure that you're supporting regional cities, regional activations, to support this huge tournament that is going to really impact positively productivity and economic growth within our nation?
So FIFA, it's a great example of what we can plan in terms of have good coordination. And to your point, regional, you have to make sure that your Surrey is attached to that, because people will want, if they come here, you want to keep them here, not only go and see a match, but then come to Surrey because you can come and have a night here, and this is what you can do here. I unfortunately cannot tell you what's coming down the line, because that's Minister of Sport that's leading the way on the FIFA. But there is a responsibility as a country when you receive big events like that to be part of giving the financial support to provinces and cities to support these events that request a lot of investments. Because it is a driver, it is economic driver, but we have to make sure that we're supporting the events. So unfortunately, I cannot give you more information around that. I know the Minister of Sports is working on that. But there is for us a really opportunity for growth on the regional sector, not only be putting all our efforts on where the game's going to be. And it's something that we have talked about in government, making sure how we're gonna make sure that these events will have an impact in the region of where they are at. So it is something that's on our radar.
Any final comments?
Well, it was really, really a pleasure to be here with you guys. Again, sometimes you look at me thinking, because I'm translating in my head, I really mean that. But know that I'm an advocate for the tourism sector. I know that the economy for you guys here will be very important. And there is a path for the future for Surrey that I'm really looking forward to see and work with you and see how I can be an advocate for you guys here in Surrey. It's not, yes, I've been to Vancouver, but I've been to Surrey. I'm telling you, twice since I've been a minister. I really believe in Surrey. I really believe in this region because we want to grow regional impact, and I think Surrey should be the biggest country, the biggest city of BC.
And
The mayor says that.
Surrey is an opportunity city as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Everyone, a round of applause
Thank
for
you so
Minister
much.
Ferrada. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our sponsors. A round of applause again to the Vancouver Football Club. Discover Surrey. Everyone, we have so many things happening. I know spring break is upon us. We're still waiting for that spring weather. But next week on Monday, we have Federal Minister Anita Anand here at the Surrey Board of Trade for a roundtable. Minister Mary Ng on Thursday next week. I'm heading to Taiwan next Friday to really promote Surrey with our Regional Economic Development Agency, Invest Vancouver. And we're so looking forward to that. We also have a trade mission next month to Mexico, and then in May in Ireland. So look forward to all of these pieces that are part of Surrey's economic development strategy. Everyone, make it a great business day.